I'm recording. Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, no problem. So here are some of the options. These are not this is not the end all be all, but these are some of the options that we've kind of thought about for New Hanover Lutheran with starting up a garden. We've kind of varied it on a number of different fronts, which we're going to talk through really quickly. So the first option, option A, envisions a 3 to 5,000 square foot space of temporary fencing. When I say temporary fencing, it's probably going to be T-posts. They're metal posts with deer fencing material that's affixed to it. This would be something that Trellis would install together with New Hanover Lutheran members. It is not as permanent and as long lasting as other options, but it is cheaper. Um, this would also include 3,000 square feet of a mounded bed garden with the irrigation. So that's the drip tape irrigation system I was briefly describing. It requires 4 or 5 days of able bodied adults, 2 for fencing, 2 for garden, and 1 more just kind of for good measure. Um, it's relatively low cost. This is on the pro side. It's relatively low risk, meaning that you can take it out. It can be undone if you need to, if you decide this isn't what we want to do. And because of those factors, it gives you an easy out if the program doesn't take off, which I don't anticipate happening. But if that's what happens, you can kind of opt out a little bit more easily. On the con side, it doesn't have the aesthetic curb appeal as a proper deer fence would have. It requires more time and labor for Trellis and for New Hanover. Um, and I don't really anticipate this being true, but it might have some structural gaps that allow critters in. With a deer fence, a proper deer fence, professionally installed, it's very unlikely that deer or other critters get in. Not impossible, but it's harder. Um, on this level, it's about $1,500 for the fencing materials and installation. The garden itself with the irrigation system is $4,000 to put in, and then the question of programming is still sort of hanging out there. And I think would probably be a conversation for another time with Jennifer involved and sort of talking about what you guys hope for, and that's going to be the case for all of these. Option B is 5,000 feet of square feet of permanent deer fencing with 3,000 square feet of mounded bed gardens. And this does require still some time on the ground for the installation of the garden, but not nearly as much effort as the fencing does. It requires less labor and time on the pro side. It looks a lot nicer, and I'll show you some pictures. Um, it will lose some value if and when you decide to expand. So if you go for a 5,000 square foot fenced in area and decide at some point, oh my gosh, this thing is growing, we're going to have to take out one of these 3 fence walls and expand in that direction, and then put some additional fencing that's going to add some cost. But because this is a 5,000 square foot fence with a 3,000 square foot garden, it does give you some flexibility to start small and then expand or contract within that footprint. So it gives you some flexibility. It is a bigger upfront investment, um, and it's more permanent, making it harder to take down. These fences, approximately for that kind of footprint, is about $4,500, and that includes a couple gates, including a wide gate for machinery to get in and out, which you're going to want. Um, and then the garden is about the same cost regardless because it's got the same footprint. Option C is a much larger footprint. 15,000 square feet would basically take up the bulk of that space behind the church. That's the fencing with, again, a 3,000 square foot area of mounded beds for the garden. Again, it requires less labor and time because we'd be bringing someone else in to install the fence. It does look a lot nicer, and it gives you total flexibility for the space, which would allow you to start small and expand or contract within that footprint. Also, it would give you a lot more options for things like fruit trees, fruiting bushes, potentially animal husbandry at some point, maybe chickens or something else. I've got chickens, which I love, but with that much space, you could really explore a lot of possibilities, especially if youth programs are happening on site. This
Donna
is
has a
again,
lot of experience with chickens.
yeah, okay. There is a greater upfront investment, and it is more permanent. This is about $9,000 for the fencing, and again, $4,000 for the garden, just with that 3,000 square foot footprint. And just for, not that you've not seen it, but just for your edification, and so I can be as thorough as possible, I'll show you some examples of the fencing material. So this is a bad picture, but that's a T-post. It's got that little white top and it's a green fence, and we would put 2 layers of 4-foot deer fencing. That's going to be an 8-foot deer fence. And again, not a great picture, and the mountains are not included with the fence installation. Sorry. This is more of a, this is a deer fence, a proper deer fence. This is an 8-foot deer fence with woven wire mesh and marmot mesh at the bottom, which has a skirt that goes down into the ground, so that if a groundhog or some sort of other marmot tries to get in, digs down, it hits something, can't get through the wire. So this kind of keeps several manners of critters from getting into a garden space. So that's the difference between the two fencing materials. And again, I'm going to share this document with you, and it's not the end all be all, but it does kind of paint a picture of some of the different visions that we've had for this space.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The soil at the church is not the best. So I guess, like, I don't really know how this mounded beds work, or how much soil you need existing versus what you bring in. Have you contemplated that, or?
Yeah, the cost of the garden install factors in bringing in compost enriched mushroom soil from a company that we work with in Laurel Valley, and they are phenomenal. It's everything that we used for the Rolling Hills installation, and it just about guarantees that the garden gets off to a rip roaring start in the first year. At the end of the first year, we come back in that fall, which is what we just did at Rolling Hills, and we put a 3-inch layer of organic leaf mulch on top of those beds, so we don't leave them naked into the winter. And that organic material just catapults it into the second year. So over the course of time, we basically create the mounds on top of the existing. We don't do much to the existing soil, but by dropping that on top of what you have, you're actually going to enrich the soil that you have there over the course of years. The soil is going to get much better in that space.
What about water? Initially, when we had talked about this, it was said we need a water source, and we didn't really know anything about that requirement. And we do have a water line that runs out through the cemetery, but we've also kicked around the idea of rain barrels attached to the rain gutters. Because we have a tremendous amount of roof area and runoff. So is there an idea, if you don't go the rain barrel route, like how much water is required, and we're on a well system, so just kind of wondering about that.
Yeah, right off the top, all the more reason for a drip tape irrigation system on a timer, because you can have a lot more control over how much water is being delivered. I would need to do some mathematics to make a determination about a 3,000 square foot garden, assuming it was full, like whole hog, things growing everywhere. With the drip tape, I could do some math and get back to you about the water cost with a drip tape irrigation system. But I don't know that right now. I can just tell you that it is the most efficient way to water crops. So of all the different options, it would cost the least. But on the rain barrel front, yes, it is very doable, and particularly when you have a lot of rooftop space and runoff, that is something that you can completely employ, and would be something of a very interesting science experiment of sorts, particularly if youth were involved, because I was talking a little bit about this with Pastor Scott, that you could have sort of a battery of rain barrels arranged around the backside of the church, that are all sort of being filled with, every time it rains, you're capturing all that, and all of those could be conceivably connected at their lowest point to a cistern, which has solar powered, um, like a solar powered timer operated pump that kicks on and pulls it out of the cistern, which gets refilled by the rain barrels. Otherwise, you're going to be hauling water back and forth between your rain barrels. You don't really want to do that. So you want to figure out a way to move it from all the barrels to where you need it. That all said, we had a pretty dry year. And, we did have serious bouts of rain for stretches, and that's been the forecast for the foreseeable future. When we get rain, we get a lot of it, but when we don't get it, we really don't get it for a stretch. So it's a good thing to have, and I think it would be a good thing to explore, but I wouldn't count on it for providing all of the water that you need throughout the course of a growing season. That said, there are crop selections that you can make that are less, require less water, but that will impact yield as well.
It'd be like a Prius.
Exactly.
It'd be like a Prius car where we have.
That's right. That's right. So, yeah.
I have a quick question, I guess tagging on to the water usage. We would need to have an alternative. I like the idea of the rain barrels, because I think that's really a significant way to help reduce cost and reuse perfectly good water, right? But knowing that it wouldn't be covering the full use, how easy is it to have the option of both? Is it just a matter of having our the setup where the access is at the back of the church to the water supply? Is it easy to have both options, or?
Yes, the harder thing to do between the two is to figure out capturing rainwater and getting it to where you need it to be efficiently, which again, I think would be on a timer and a pump connected to a cistern, connected to all of your rain barrels. So there's a lot of figuring out to do there. Compared to that, installing a drip tape irrigation system is fairly straightforward, and that would be on a timer connected to your main line. But to do both, yes, go ahead.
So the drip irrigation couldn't be combined somehow so that you could either run it off of another water supply or your rain barrel system?
It could be set up that way. Yeah, it could.
Okay.
That's not hard. That part's not hard. You would just need a little bit of training and someone that could be there to say, I'm gonna pull it from here, since we have it, and stop pulling it from there, and
Yeah.
turn this valve, open this valve,
Right.
turn this on, turn that off.
Because the drips, you would want the drip system, I would imagine, like that
Yeah.
that key. So if you have the opportunity to conjoin the two systems.
Exactly. You would use the exact same drip tape system that's in place to deliver the water either way.
No,
Do
David,
we have,
go ahead. Susan.
I'm sorry, do we have any idea what the cost for the water